Hi, and welcome to the Everywhere Workplace podcast. It's an in-depth conversation featuring the voices shaping the Everywhere Workplace. On each episode, you'll learn the important role technology plays in the evolving remote work environment. You'll hear from the best minds in the industry, discuss the future of work and how companies can value trust, deliver better employee experiences, and provide smarter IT connections, regardless of geographic location. So let's get started. My name's Jamie Whalen, and today with me is Ira Wolfe, President and Chief Googlization Officer at Poised for the Future Company. Welcome, Ira. How are you today?
Hey, Jamie, it's great to be here. Thanks. It's exciting to be the first guest, right?
You are. You're the first guest. It's going to be a fun show, I think. I mean, you have been doing this for a much longer time than me, so I'm excited to have you here. So hopefully you can make me as good as what you guys do on your show.
Definitely try.
So you've been kind of part of this from the very beginning, right? This kind of state of DEX report. I'm going to give anyone on this this podcast, just a little overview for everyone to know that before we get into it. You know, the State of the Digital Employee Experience report was really written working with global IT, DEX and future of work experts, influencers, along with tons of primary third-party research, along with Ivanti's insights, to highlight the evolution taking place in the workplace and the employee experiences in technology. It's changed. It's really, really changed, as you know, Ira. And this will be the second report. I mean, we've done other reports as well, but some of the participants we had over 10,000 people that were part of this from all over the US, the UK, Germany, Netherlands, Japan, China, Australia. I mean, it's a big, big deal. So this was the report, that it kind of came from and really housed from. And Ira's really going to help give a little bit of background kind of too and some answers and his expertise and where he comes from. So what is your main takeaway, Ira, from the DEX report, really? What was your main takeaway from it?
Well, a non-specific takeaway would be there's a lot of work to be done. Even someone who, I've written a number of books. We talk about Googlization all the time, which is convergence.
I love that word, by the way.
People, technology, and business. So I live this world, but I found it really revealing that about 1 out of 4, 26% exactly, of the respondents said that they're willing to quit their job because of a bad digital employee experience. I live this space. This is what I do every day. I talk to people. I'm interviewed. We have our own podcast. No one ever talked about that before, and that was probably the most shocking thing. Is that 1 out of 4 employees are not only fed up with everything else going on in the company, but they're just uncomfortable with the technology that they're using. Not uncomfortable to use it, but it's just too cumbersome, too frustrating, too confusing, and they're willing to quit because of that.
That is a staggering. I mean, when you say 1 in 4, that's even crazier to me. You don't hear a percentage, but 1 in 4, that's a lot.
Especially in today's world, it's so difficult. I mean, with the labor market the way it is, and will continue to be that way, you can't afford you can't afford to even lose 1 out of 10, but 1 out of 4 is pretty crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's really expensive to keep good employees, right? But to onboard and all of that process. So when you have unhappy workers, it's really a big problem. I totally agree. Why is the digital employee experience important, would you find? I mean, I know you kind of talked about it a little bit before, but to you, why do you think we really need to pay attention?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things there. Let me unpack it a little bit. And one of these came from the earlier report that Ivanti did, The Everywhere Workplace, which I love. I love that title. It really is a workplace without borders, and the pandemic accelerated that. I'm not sure you and I'd be talking about this now if we didn't have the pandemic yet. We would have been talking about it in a couple of years from now. But the pandemic really threw us all into an online world. So the digital experience became really, really important all of a sudden. And most companies didn't really focus on it before. And another part of the survey that came out, there was only 1 out of 5 of companies that looked at the digital, the user end, the end user experience from a digital experience. Primarily, is it going to be more productive? Is it more secure? Is there safety? But when it came to investing in whatever type of, and I live in the world of HR, but any type of technology, it really wasn't a top priority. That if they don't like it, they can leave. They can lump it. We're not going to give them a choice. And that has changed dramatically, again, because of the pandemic and because of the labor market, and so many people now being highly dependent on the ability to be able to connect, and then companies need to be able to connect safely.
Yeah, I mean, I do remember actually you say that. It's funny because I remember specifically asking for a Mac and they wouldn't allow me to have a Mac. It was a huge deal to even ask for a different type of technology. I got what they had. There was no yes or no's or anything. It was what it was. And if you didn't like it, then that was it. So
yeah, and when people got sent home, I mean, it's about 28, 29 months ago. People got sent home in March of 2020, and many people only had a desktop. So all of a sudden, they were working from home on their personal devices. It could have been their smartphone, it could have been a tablet, it could have been a laptop, and all of a sudden it became okay. Just logging in with whatever you got. You have to show up for work. You can work from home, but you have to connect. But it was really up to the employees to figure that out. And I know I've heard Jeff Abbott, the CEO, and some of the other interviews that I've been on with them. It was pretty incredible. Some of the stories of what companies have had to adapt to, and employees have had to adapt to, and just they were really flat-footed. They were completely caught off guard.
Yeah. Why do you feel what do you feel like the difference is between employee experience and digital experience? I mean, there's obviously a little bit of a difference. What do you feel like the main difference is between that, though?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure there's a difference. I think, in at least in my opinion, and this is my opinion, is that there's employee experience, and then the digital aspect of that is part of the overall employee experience. So I'm not sure it's a separate entity, but it's just like culture. I mean, if you have, and we talk a lot about this, people want to have a good culture. They want to have a positive experience. And it's easy to design a culture, but to make it come to life is really up to how people feel about the experience. So if my first experience is walking through the front door, how am I greeted, how was I received, how does the manager deal with me, that's all part of the employee experience. But if I'm doing this remotely, especially in today's age, where so many people are still working remote, my first contact with the company is, I've got to log in. I've got to go to the VPN. The VPN doesn't work. I just read this, I think it was a Gartner study, that employees are using at least 10 different apps or software every day. And there's, I don't know how many browsers and windows are open. But if I have to log into one, but it's not the same password, I have to log into another, and then I go to another, and then I'm locked out. If I can't log in and I can't communicate and get my work done, it's a bad. I'm not sure I, as an employee, would say, "Oh, I love working there and I have such a great experience, but my digital experience is bad." I think the digital experience is just part of the overall experience, and people are demonstrating that day in and day out. They're walking. There's 4.5 million people that are quitting their jobs every month because of a bad experience.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. And I've heard Jeff Abbott here talk about the same thing, right? It's so much about the culture and making sure that your culture feels enabled, right? Your employees feel enabled. And if you're not giving them the right tools, you can have a really big problem. So,
yeah, and I think I can just add one thing to that, because we're talking about employee experience, but the employee experience really starts almost pre-employee. And this is where a lot of my focus is. This is what my book was about, Recruiting in the Age of Googlization. It starts with a candidate experience. And the candidate experience doesn't start with, oh, well, I applied for the job and I didn't hear from anybody. Or what was the experience when I first went to somebody's website? Was I able to find the job? Was I able to apply easily? What was that experience? Did I have to upload a resume and fill out an application? All those things are digital experiences. So the digital experience, if it's too difficult for me to log on to apply for a job, then I'm not going to do it because I have a million other choices. We have an acronym, and I hope I can say this on publicly, but it's FCDD. So the short is it's effed up, but the FCDD, but it stands for frustrating, confusing, disappointing, and distracting. And my advice to everybody, maybe we're cutting to the chase here, other than using Ivanti and having secure software and focusing on the digital experience, but ultimately is go through every interaction that an employee has. And this goes back to the question you asked, what's the difference between digital and employee experience? Yeah. Every interaction you have, FCDD, is it frustrating? Is it disappointing? Is it confusing? Is it disappointing or is it distracting? And one by one, start peeling the onion. And I'll tell you, people will tell you very easily what's frustrating, confusing, disappointing, distraction. So, the solution to having a better experience is really pretty simple. Just don't F it up. Don't FCD it up. We say it and we laugh and we smile, but that's the goal. It doesn't take much more thought than that.
Yeah, I mean, I like that actually. Maybe we'll have that as like one of the notes at the end, right? What that means, your acronym. But
yeah, I always put an asterisk next to it and explain it.
I like that though. It's so true though. It really is, right? Even in line the stuff that I have to work on every day, everything's external facing, right? It's the first place that people go. They're going to view you. They're going to see what you stand for, all of that kind of stuff. It really does start with exactly that. Your website, your experience, all of that, and what they want to contribute. So I highly agree. And I don't think we have to edit that one out. I think you're fine. So another one I have for you, Ira. So really, what do you feel are some of the common issues that affect the digital employee experience, though? Like, what are the main things that really affect it that we need to really think about and change?
Well, I think attitude. I mean, I'm going to go back to attitude, and I mentioned it before, where only, was it 20? Well, one is only 25% of CXOs, of the chief executives, or the C-suite, really, identified workplace culture as a priority. So if they're not recognizing the culture as a priority and employee experience is really the a metric of how well the culture's doing, then that's a problem. They don't even recognize it as a problem. They're selecting technology because it's going to save them money, it's going to automate something, it's going to improve productivity. But there's just not a focus on the people using it. There's not a consideration. And then when the CTOs are making decisions based on what the criteria that the C-suite sets down, then the end user is not even considered. And I know this to be true. And again, I focus a lot on the candidate side, but especially working a lot in HR. There's very little consideration to the end user. And when there is the end user is usually the employees. So it could be HR, it could be sales, it could be marketing, whoever is using it. But ultimately, the end user is the employee or the candidate. Yeah. And it's like, well, they're just going to have to live with it. And that's old school. That's just not the way it is anymore. That's living in an alternate universe. If you still believe that, they just have to take it.
Yeah, I think that's a very antiquated way of looking at things. It's hard though. There's a lot of companies though, Ira. I don't know if they're accustomed to really kind of thinking that way, right? This is still very new to them, and the way they did things for a long time worked for them. How is it that we have to change their mind all of a sudden and they have to think differently, right? So I think some organizations can get it, but I think it's probably a little bit more difficult, I would say.
Life's changing fast. There's and living again from the technology world in Googlization. Ray Kurzweil, who many people might be familiar with, he was the head of engineering at Google, and he was a co-founder of Singularity University. But he had a great quote, and he talks about this accelerating, or a good quote, but a good model. And he talked about accelerating pace of change. So if you think of all the events that happened in 2020, and we had a lot of them. We had the pandemic, and we had the civil rights issues. We had, I'm drawing a blank on on his name, and I shouldn't, but the individuals who were the people who were killed. We had wildfires. We had storms. We had just the quarantine, the shutdown, the economics. All those things happened, and we forget it. It became a blur. But it took 12 months. Oh, we also had a presidential election in the midst of
throw
that.
that in there.
Yeah, that's still, for some people, is still not over. So we've had 12 months of that. If you think about how fast things are changing and you use this accelerating rate, this pace of change, that in 2040, just 20 years later, all those events would occur within 3 months, which is really scary when you think about it. And if you go out another 20 years, so we're 40 years out, the pace of change will occur every 11 days. So, I mean, it's not everything's going to change, but
here, Ira, you're scaring me here.
Yeah. So they actually, I mean, I just read this term the other day. They call it about the cascading trauma events, and it's that everything, it's one thing happens, and it's just we feel it's piled on. That if it took longer for these events, the change just happened over a longer period of time, that we wouldn't be as stressed out and anxious and burnt out as we normally are. But now it's just one more thing. I know the other day, I mean, I just went up and it was a long day. It was about 9:30 at night. I forgot, my mother, who's almost 99, I forgot to go in and pay the child, the aides that come in and help her. So I went in and I could not log on to the bank account. Set my password. The password wasn't coming. Finally got it. It didn't accept it. Totally aggravating. Now, normally it takes about 5 minutes. I could easily just walk down, done it on the desktop, and it would have worked. But because it was just one more thing that day, just didn't need it that late. So roll that back to think about all your employees. They've got personal issues. They've got a life. They're human beings. They're not robots that are coming to work. They've got a life. They've got kids. They got older parents. They've got spouses. They've got gas crisis going out of control. There's just challenges that the employer may not have complete control over. The internet, the internet was down. Maybe where they are doesn't have great reception. I mean, there's a whole. The last thing you can do is make it difficult to log into their accounts. I mean, it's or they're working on old equipment or their own devices because the company doesn't, provide it, or they can't get IT support. Or very simply is, and this fits into digital experience, I'm an employee. I'm thinking of planning a vacation. I want to find out how many PTO days I have. And one is I can't do it, because I have to call HR, leave a message, or do something. But now a lot of companies are using chat and chatbots and very easy ways to do it. But again, if I have to log in and they have trouble logging in, then just finding out that I'm just trying to plan my vacation, they owe me 20 days, I want to take 5 of them, and I'm just frustrated. And then what the Ivanti report, the DEX report, showed is that's just the straw that broke the camel's back. I'm going to look for another job because this is just too darn hard to get what I earned.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I have a similar personal story. My husband and his line of work, he worked for a company that did not give him technology. They said, oh, well, we'll send you the programs. Yep. And what he does, he has to know very specific details, right? They said, we will send you specific links and certain programs, but we won't give you the hardware to do it. We're really trying to make it easy for everybody. And that was a huge problem for him. He didn't feel connected. He felt isolated in a way that I feel really reflected just a negative kind of mindset of his, right? That, even that too, their HR, right? Their HR was a company that was outsourced. It wasn't even part of the organization, so he'd have to email, to your point, Ira, right? He had to email someone to get one answer. And it was really frustrating when he was just trying to do his job to have to worry about this other thing. So it's not always fun. Yeah.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Jamie. I mean, that's a great point, because so many people blame the disengagement on on being remote and we can't have the team, we can't collaborate. While it is definitely easier, and there's some interactions to do it in person, and now that we're speaking again and going to events, there's definitely times that is easier to do. But most of the problems that happen on day-to-day functions that we're doing our work isn't because we're at a distance. It's because it's too hard to use the technology. The company, as you said, didn't provide it, so everybody's logging in on a different device, and the managers weren't trained how to use it, how to use how to apply the digital experience. I mean, there's people that love the digital experience when it's done right. There's really some really excellent ways to collaborate and work on projects and communicate. But you have to teach people how to use it, and it's different than just walking down the hallway. And I always bring this up. Gallup has been doing the engagement surveys for years, and they just released one, the Global State of the Workplace. But for 30 years, only 30% of the workplace was engaged, and that burden fell on managers doing their job. And for 30 years, and even longer, everybody was saying people don't quit companies, they quit their manager. But it was only 30%, 32%, somewhere hovering around that mark for decades. Then the pandemic hits, and now everybody blames technology. It's like,
you gotta blame somebody, right?
People are disengaged because of the technology. No, they're not. The managers weren't good then. They're not doing their job now. Yes, it is more difficult to be able to collaborate, do team building, onboard somebody who's remote, but it's not impossible. It's not even that difficult because everybody's willing to do it. Because if somebody says, I value working from home, that I don't have to commute, I don't have to put $5-6 worth of a gallon of gas in, I get to spend time with my kids, I'm not stuck in traffic every day. There's a million reasons why people feel comfortable with it. They're willing to put up with a little bit of inconvenience, but to tell somebody they don't have, just go out and buy your own equipment and it's up to you to figure this out. No, that's not good. But that hasn't changed either, because people used to show up for work and they go, oh, sorry, Jamie's out this week, so we haven't gotten your ID card. We didn't get your computer yet. We don't have a desk for you. Some things didn't change, but it became gaslighting. We just point to the pandemic as just like it was before the pandemic. Millennials were the problem. You were the downfall of everything wrong with the universe. And now it's millennials and the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, right? It does work, right? But I do think there's a huge part of culture that is embedded. I think you saw the LinkedIn Live. I know you were on it, I think, with Jeff Abbott, who did it. He did a really good job at talking about the culture, right? And, I can honestly say I see him live and breathe it every day, and he makes me feel connected to something bigger, right? So it's something that I've not always had at organizations, right? I think they've tried really hard, but I haven't always had that. But to your point, I'm a working mom of 3 kids, right? There's a lot of moving pieces all the time, and being able to work from home, my everywhere workplace, right? Just like our show is all about, has really opened up my eyes to almost how much I missed with my first daughter. I was always working. We had an hour and a half commute into Boston every day with traffic and in different types of Google ways. It was never the same trip. And I think now I'm getting to see, my kids grow up in a whole different way. And so it's been a really kind of a beautiful thing. But because I've had the culture, I've had the digital experience, it's supported me as well along this, making that everywhere workplace has really worked for me. And so I've been very fortunate, but I know not everyone is, but I'll tell you, I get to see a lot more of those little things. I think everyone sometimes misses, or they may have missed it. They were in the office all the time. So,
well, there was and I believe this was through the Associated Press and a new university, but they looked at workers who came back to work, and the stress levels went up. And I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was something like the workers who finally came back to the office, either voluntarily or involuntarily, that they were more stressed and it was worse than it was working from home. But interesting enough, the workers who never left work, and now the other workers came back to work. The experience was even worse because they sort of enjoyed having the place to themselves. So it hasn't worked out for anybody by forcing people back because, it's this technology and working remote and working through Slack and working through Zoom. And we need people in person to get the work done. No, you go through an hour and a half commute every day, and now it's doubly expensive what it was before the pandemic. No, you're not going to have people coming in with I can't say an open mind, a fresh mind, a rejuvenated mind, an engaged mind, because they get to work and all of a sudden they get a call from childcare or something at home, or the plumber shows up, or something goes on. It's not that people should never go back to work. I think there's a place. But we need to redesign it. I mean, I talk about reimagining your tomorrow every day, and we need to do that. And part of that goes back to what we're talking about today. We need to reimagine the employee experience, and part of that employee experience is the digital employee experience. And even I, who again wrote a book on it, really didn't think of it beyond the candidate experience. I really didn't think of. I found it annoying that. Why do I have to make an appointment in HR to find out what my vacation days are, or if this is covered, or, whatever, or even more serious events of a harassment or something, that it was just too difficult. But that had nothing to do with where people worked. It was just the mindset. So we really need to kind of hit reboot. Think about what this working from anywhere or from everywhere, but anywhere without walls, any place without walls, what that looks like. And, rather than trying to retrofit the old workplace, the old experience into that, you're never going to have the digital employee experience has different metrics than what you used when we showed up for work and crammed into a meeting room, into a conference room.
Yeah.
But it can be done.
Yep. I also think we need to be more intentional, right? So, I have a lot of friends who are back in the office 2 days a week, or, it's not fully, right? It's like a hybrid, right? Ira, and they'll say, I don't like to go to the office to Zoom next to the person next to, that's not the point, right? So the intentional factor is, if we did really think about hybrid, it needs to be, one digital set, maybe one not. And when you're in the office and you're in a meeting, you're in person in a meeting, if that's really what you want. But I think there's a lot of blending that still needs to happen, that still needs to take place, that I don't think anyone has quite figured out yet. I think they're trying to, but yeah.
As I always describe it, I said we talk about remote or in person as binary choices. It's one or the other.
Yeah.
And if you put one end of the spectrum and give it a 1 and the other one's 100, where you have 98 options in between, and probably more, and it's going to be unique to the culture. It depends where your people are. And you're right. One of the most annoying things is I just went through an hour and a half of traffic, spent all of my money in gas, and I'm sitting in communicating with somebody through Zoom because they couldn't come to work, or my customers couldn't come to work, or my clients couldn't come to work. That's why, by the way, that defines your culture.
Yep.
And everybody has to become a little bit more patient. We talk about there's no more best practices, and I know everybody likes to have best practices and copy them. One is you can't copy them because it's unique to your culture. But we went from that world of best practices, and then we went to good practices. It wasn't a step down; it just was a practical way when life was only complicated. Now that life is complex, the best we've got are evolving practices. We're all figuring it out as we go. We're building the plane as we took off, and we're trying to figure out how to stay in the air and land it eventually. But hybrid work is a perfect example of that. There are certain businesses that have to be in person, but not every job. Even healthcare. People say, well, yeah, nurses and surgeons mostly have to be in place. But you know what? Farm techs don't. You can
Hmm.
distribute stuff. You have robots running around the hallways distributing medication.
Yep.
So not everybody does, but healthcare primarily, but a lot of professional offices, a lot of law offices and accounting offices, went completely remote. And 2 years ago, they said, no, it will never, ever, ever work. And they couldn't wait to get back to the office. And then after 2 years, it's like, no, we're there. But for them, going back to our what's the difference between digital experience and employee experience, it's one.
Yep.
If you're remote, or if you're thinking of going remote, if you have a significant number of employees that are remote, digital experience and employee experience are synonymous. If you think they're two different
Yeah.
things, then I think you're on the wrong track. But there may be, as I said, in healthcare organizations or other organizations where you might have different metrics for both.
I do want to go back to one thing though that you said that I think was really great, and it kind of connects these two as well, is that um, your first experience, right? When you come on, right? When they see your website, right? Or when they apply, right? It's all coinciding with one another to that whole point, right? It's that culture, it's that first part, that first line of experiences that you create for a digital experience for your employee to have that experience, right? Which is if they're going to stay or, so I think that's really important too. And that was an important note I feel like
Yeah.
you've had.
Yeah, I mean, employee experience is really every interaction an employee has with the
Yep.
company. And that could be from, what's their interaction with leadership? Do they even know leadership? A lack of an interaction doesn't mean that you get a get out of jail free card. If they don't feel connected to leadership, then that's a bad experience. If they don't feel connected to management or their coworkers or their digital equipment, but it's also rewards and recognition and compensation, and all those things are now related to compensation because one of the events that I just spoke at, it was actually an HR tech company. And they did this as a sideline, and I said, "This is really brilliant." They had a daily pay wallet that, hey, I'm a worker. I'm making an hourly wage. I owe bills, but I'm not going to get paid for 2 weeks. But I put 16 hours in, just like you went up to Upwork or Fiverr or
Yep.
did your gig jog, that I can get paid that day. I
I
can
like that.
draw that down because I got a bill to pay and I don't have to go borrow money or postpone it, or my child's sick, or I need groceries, or I need more gas. And how am I going to do this? And I don't have to stress out about it. I can just go in and download that money. But that takes a good digital experience. You can't say it's there and then put all these hurdles to get there. So there are so many. It's really a rabbit hole, but there are so many opportunities for companies to do a little bit to get a major competitive advantage on this employee experience. So again, I gave you the SCDD,
Yep.
acronym. But going back and just looking at every interaction an employee has with your company, and look at how do I remove the FCDDs, the frustrations, confusions, disappointment, and distraction. What can you do to make it better? And sometimes it's just bringing it back to even keel. You may not be able to fix it. Just don't dig a deeper hole. But the better you can get it, the good news is most companies aren't going to be able to replicate what you do because it's unique to your culture. So you're defining your competitive advantage, and if you're concerned about where we're going to recruit and how we're going to retain employees longer and recruit them faster, then it really is focusing on the employee experience. And again, with us living in an everywhere workplace, a lot of those people that you want are going to be digital or are going to be remote.
Yeah. Talking around that, who do you actually think at the end of the day is responsible for the digital workplace employee experience? Who do you think, if we were going to pick, one person, do you think it's the organization? Do you think it's, who do you think is responsible for providing that?
Well, it's the leaders, and then it's defining who the leaders are. I don't think this is delegated because it says digital in there that you define it out to, that it just becomes a CTO or, technology. And if it's an HR as well, this involves the people. It's employee experience. So let's get HR involved. It's not. It can't be assigned that way. I mean, it really has to shape your culture. If the mission has to be that we are focused on the employee experience. There's a lot of little euphemisms for it: people-centric, culture, people-forward, people-first, whatever you want to call it, but it still boils down to, do we care about the employee experience? And clearly the DEX report said no, because only 20% said we care about the end user experience.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of really good stats in there too, Ira, that, explain a lot more. And I could go into it all day. I think we could probably talk about it for a very long time.
Yeah, one of the other ones is sitting right in front of me. I don't know why it just popped up here. But it's only 20% assign a budget for improving the employee digital experience. So you have only one out of four CXOs say workplace is a priority, workplace culture is a priority, and then even fewer give money to create it. So it's like, yeah, it's really important, but we're not going to budget for it.
Oh my God. I knew someone who they kept saying, "Oh yeah, every year, we're gonna set a time, signed for training." Right? There was a kind of a program, because how many people know about products, right? Product updates, right? And if we're in it, or you're engineer, any of that kind of stuff, even in marketing, you also still have to set up time to improve yourself, right? And learn about the new updates. And I remember they'd say every year, "Oh yeah, we're gonna do the training." And every year they were still on the two versions behind, because the company did not give them the time allotted to really do that. And it was such a hinder I saw that could have been fixed if they, had the better experience. So I've seen it in different kind of places. So, and I know we're kind of getting close to time, Iris, so I want to be cognizant of that. A couple last questions. What can be done to improve the digital work, force experience in your company? What would you say if you could give anybody some words of wisdom here on this call or / podcast that we're doing here? What would you say they could do to improve it? If they started tomorrow, what are some things that they could do?
I think we just covered it. It's make it a priority. I mean, it's got to be a priority. It's like self-awareness. If you don't think that you have a problem, or it's somebody else's problem, or somebody else has to fix the problem, or it's just going to go away on its own, really employee experience has got to be number one. And again, especially if you're looking at recruitment and retention, it's got to be number one. But also customer experience. It really has to be the life and soul of an organization, and that's going to come from the top. I mean, you're just not going to attract. This isn't from frontline workers. I mean, you're going to have to get them to embrace it, but from leadership, it's got to be the mindset that we're going to walk the talk. We're going to focus on employee experience.
So you'd say it's really executive buy-in. They really need to buy this mindset as well to make sure they're orchestrating it for their organization.
Oh, if they don't do it, it's dead in the water.
Yeah.
If the C-suite doesn't do it, this isn't mid-management, this isn't frontline workers. But the market, I truly believe the marketplace is dictating this. That companies, I mean, I know, I'm quite active on interviews and speaking, and there's a sense that there's a tipping point. There's still a lot of organizations that are out to blame others and waiting for it to pass. And we've been through this before. No, it's not. There's not a single indication that we're taking a step back on technology, or that the labor shortages are going away. That's just not the future. And for anybody that's going to be around for the next 10 or 15 or even 20 years, that's your reality. You're not going to get past it.
Well, Ira, it was such a pleasure having you on the show today. I have one last question though for you. It's probably like the funnest one. Where is your Everywhere Workplace? Where is it located? You don't have to tell us the specifics of it, but and then next question after that is, where, if you could work anywhere, would your Everywhere Workplace be?
Oh, two great questions. So one is, I'm in Pennsylvania. I'm in Northeast Pennsylvania.
Very nice.
In what we affectionately call the pit. We redid the basement a few years ago, or part of the basement, and I've got an office, and didn't know I was going to turn into a little bit of a broadcasting suite, but it did 2 years ago. So that's where I'm located. Where would I be? Maybe probably on a beach somewhere. I lived in Ocean City, Maryland for a couple years, and enjoyed that. But And unfortunately, when I do some vacations and we go there, I do work from there. So, but it was really a pleasure. We were there in the end of May and sitting on the balcony with my phone and tablet, looking over the ocean is pretty cool.
All right. I know I said I had two last questions, but I have one final question. I promise this is it. Where is the craziest ever workplace that you have ever been or had?
Oh, my car.
Oh,
I was actually doing a podcast and I was coming back from a conference and we left late and it was with an interview that we tried to schedule for 6 months. I mean, it was just one of those things and we couldn't reschedule it. So I pulled off the side of the road, hooked up my laptop. My wife took pictures of it. We did it in a truck stop. So.
Oh, that's a good idea. You know what, though? You can do it anywhere. And I think this is just proof, right? As you said, you really can make the ever workplace work for you if you have the right kind of state of mind, right? The digital experience. And at the end of the day, you have that good employee experience to kind of wrap it all up. So thank you so much, Ira, for coming on our show today, being our first guest. I'm very excited. I'm sure I'm going to have you on again. But again, thank you so much. And we really appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you. Thanks for letting me be the inaugural guest, and I really appreciate that. But thanks very much. Love talking about it, obviously, and wishing everybody the best wishes in the everywhere workplace.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Ira.